"You look sad, mister. Want to meet my mommy? What the lonely CEO didn't expect on New Year's Eve will melt your heart." It was New Year's Eve, and the city buzzed with celebration. Fireworks bloomed above glittering towers, laughter echoed through the streets, and champagne flowed freely at lavish parties. But in the top-floor suite of a luxury high-rise, 42-year-old Victor Halston, a billionaire tech CEO with neatly styled silver-streaked dark hair, wore a tailored black tuxedo jacket that looked out of place on a man so weary. His pale skin was taut with fatigue, and his ice-blue eyes reflected a loneliness deeper than the night sky. Victor stared out at the skyline, untouched food beside him. His apartment was cold and silent. No friends, no family, no reason to smile. For years he had buried himself in algorithms and acquisitions after losing his wife to illness. Success came at the price of isolation. Across town, in a cozy but worn-out diner, 7-year-old Lily Monroe, with curly chestnut hair, warm brown skin, and a spark in her hazel eyes, danced around her mother's table, excited by the holiday buzz. Her mother, Grace Monroe, 35, with tired eyes, dark brown skin, and wavy black hair pulled back in a ponytail, wore a second-hand coat and an ever-resilient smile. Despite working 2 jobs, she made sure Lily always felt safe, loved, and hopeful. Victor Halston, with nowhere to go, he walked until he found himself outside a small, warm diner glowing softly against the cold night. Something about the place, modest, unassuming, full of laughter, felt alien to him, yet he stepped in. Inside, Lily Monroe, full of innocent energy, sat in a red booth beside her mother, Grace Monroe. She was feeding Lily half a grilled cheese sandwich and sipping cheap black coffee. Victor entered and sat alone in the corner, away from everyone. But Lily, with her chestnut curls bouncing and a sparkle in her hazel eyes, noticed him. She hopped off her seat and skipped over to his table with the boldness only a child could muster. "Why are you alone, mister?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. Victor blinked, surprised. "Just thinking," he replied, his voice hoarse from lack of use. "You should meet my mommy. She makes people smile even when they're sad." Lily grinned, pointing toward Grace, who was now watching cautiously. Victor gave a half-smile. "Does she now?" "Yup, come sit with us." Before he could respond, Lily tugged his hand. Something in her warmth and the sparkle of her brown skin and glowing smile melted his resistance. He followed. Victor Halston sat nervously across from Grace Monroe. She offered him a gentle, cautious smile. Lily, still bouncing with excitement, nestled between them. "So," Grace said, stirring her coffee, "you don't look like you come here often." Victor chuckled softly. "You're right, I'm not used to places like this." Grace studied him, his designer jacket, his polished shoes, his distant gaze. She didn't judge, just noticed. "Well, welcome to the real world," she said, her voice half playful, half worn from life's weight. Lily interrupted. "Mommy, I told him you're magic." Victor smiled faintly. "She did." Grace's eyes softened. "Lily likes to believe in magic, keeps things from feeling too heavy." Victor looked down at the steaming mug in front of him. "I think I forgot how to believe in anything." There was silence, warm and full of unspoken things. Grace, still watching his expression, reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded paper. "Lily drew this earlier," she said. "She said it was for someone who needed cheering up. Maybe that's you." Victor unfolded the drawing, a crayon version of 3 people holding hands under a rainbow. Something inside him cracked. Grace Monroe had lived through storms, emotional, financial, and personal. But none of them had dimmed the light in her. She carried herself with the quiet strength of someone who no longer feared rock bottom. She had been there, and survived. Victor watched her as she gently helped Lily with a napkin, wiping ketchup from the corner of her daughter's mouth, smiling all the while. He noticed how Grace spoke softly but clearly, how she gave all her attention to whoever she was speaking to, how her presence made the diner feel warmer. He couldn't remember the last time he had seen someone so present. They talked, slowly, hesitantly at first. Grace told him about the part-time jobs, the struggle to pay for Lily's school supplies, the nights she skipped dinner so Lily wouldn't have to. She didn't say it with bitterness, just honesty. It was her reality, one she bore without self-pity. Victor, stunned, listened. For years he'd thrown money at charities without really knowing the stories behind the names. Sitting across from Grace made him feel ashamed of that. She glanced at him and said, "I didn't think tonight would bring any surprises, but maybe Lily was right. Maybe there is still magic in the world." Victor met her eyes, those deeply human eyes, and for the first time in years he nodded, not out of politeness but understanding. Victor Halston wasn't used to feeling helpless. He had power at his fingertips, except when it came to human emotion, and tonight that's exactly what shook him. Grace Monroe across from him was the embodiment of perseverance. Her brown skin glowed in the warm light of the diner. Her wavy black hair framed her face as she focused on Lily, then looked up at Victor with a questioning gaze. "You seem like someone who doesn't talk about himself much." Victor smiled lightly. I don't want to try, he did, slowly. He spoke of a wife who passed away 5 years ago, of the nights he stayed at the office just to avoid going home, of how building empires felt like dust in his hands, of how lonely silence had become his only consistent companion. Grace nodded. I'm sorry, that kind of loss. It doesn't care about money. He paused. Then, reaching into his coat, he pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. Not as a handout, he said. Just if you ever need help, a better job, a place, something for Lily. Grace looked at the card, then back at him. Her face was calm, unreadable. I appreciate that, but let's get something straight. I don't want charity, I want dignity. Victor respected that more than any deal he'd ever signed. The diner staff began sweeping the floor, preparing to close, but the corner booth held a conversation too human to interrupt. Victor ordered hot chocolate for Lily and coffee for the rest of them. Grace thanked him, her voice laced with gratitude but pride too. She sipped slowly, watching Lily blow bubbles into her whipped cream, laughing uncontrollably. Victor couldn't help but smile. She's happy. She always finds a reason to be, Grace said, running her fingers through her daughter's curly chestnut hair. Even when I can't. There was silence again, the kind that doesn't demand words. Grace continued, You know, I used to be someone, not just a mom trying to survive. I wanted to be a counselor, help people, but life, it got in the way. Victor leaned forward. Maybe that dream's not dead, maybe it just got delayed. Grace looked at him, unsure whether to laugh or believe. I'm not offering fairy tales, he said. Just the chance to start again. It was the first time anyone had looked at her and seen something more than a struggling mother. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either, and for now that was enough. The clock on the diner wall ticked toward midnight. Outside, firecrackers began to pop in the distance. Inside, Lily counted down with the few remaining patrons. Grace leaned her head back and smiled gently, exhaustion softening her features. Victor, his pale skin catching the faint glow from the diner's neon sign, sat still, absorbing the moment. 5, 4, 3, Lily shouted, bouncing. Victor looked over at Grace. She met his eyes, and suddenly it wasn't just about a new year. It was about something new for them both, whatever it might be. 2, 1, Happy New Year, the diner erupted into claps and laughter. Lily blew kisses to everyone. Grace chuckled, lifting her daughter into her lap. Victor, for the first time in years, whispered Happy New Year, and meant it. They sat there for another half hour, the world slowing down around them. Victor didn't want to leave. Grace didn't want the warmth to end. Eventually she stood, bundling Lily in her coat. Thank you, she said quietly. For listening, for seeing us. Victor nodded. Will I see you again? Grace smiled, tired but warm. Maybe if you're lucky, he laughed. Then I hope I'm very lucky. And just like that, the first chapter of something unexpected had begun. Victor Halston awoke to sunlight cutting across the minimalist design of his penthouse suite. The once cold and clinical space, with its white marble floors and steel-framed windows, suddenly felt too large, too empty. The echo of Lily's laughter and Grace's soft voice still lingered in his ears. He sat at the edge of his king-sized bed, his pale skin almost glowing in the morning light, running his fingers through his silver-streaked hair. For the first time in years, the loneliness that used to feel like a shield now felt like a burden. There had been something different about Grace Monroe, eyes wise with pain but still full of life. And Lily, her vibrant, unshakable 7-year-old daughter, whose chestnut curls bounced with every laugh. He poured himself black coffee, sat in his glass-walled kitchen, and stared at the business card he had given Grace the night before. Would she call had he come on too strong? Meanwhile, across the city, in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment with peeling wallpaper and second-hand furniture, Grace prepared oatmeal. She moved quietly, tired from work and the long night. Lily colored at the table, humming to herself. Grace kept glancing at the card Victor had given her. It lay on the counter beside a stack of unpaid bills. She wasn't sure what to do. Was it pride, fear, hope? Mommy, Lily chirped. Is the nice man coming back? Grace looked at her daughter, her heart caught between hesitation and instinct. I don't know, baby, but something inside her whispered, maybe he already has. Grace didn't call that day, or the next, but she thought about it, every hour. Between shifts at the community center, helping elderly neighbors and tutoring part-time for cash, her mind wandered to Victor Halston, usually cold demeanor but softened by something honest that night. She didn't trust easily, but something about him had felt real. Meanwhile, Victor sat in his office atop Halston Innovations. His assistant brought in reports, his board scheduled a Zoom call, but all he could focus on was the quiet moment in a diner that had felt more human than any meeting in years. By the third day, Grace finally dialed the number on the card. Her hand shook. It rang once, twice. Victor Halston, his voice calm, surprised. Hi, it's Grace Monroe, she said, biting her lip. From the diner. The one with the daughter who talks to strangers. Victor stood, startled by the warmth in his chest. Grace, I'm glad you called. I thought about what you said about starting again. I meant it, he replied. Whatever you need. There was a pause. Then maybe you could help me find work, something where I can grow, not just survive. Victor smiled. Let's make that happen. And just like that, the first seed of change was planted. Victor arranged everything swiftly. Within a week, Grace had a job interview lined up at a nonprofit partner of Halston Innovations, an organization focused on youth counseling. It was a dream path she had shelved long ago. Now it was unfolding again. But Grace Monroe, proud soul, found herself pacing the living room in her only professional outfit, a second-hand blazer over a faded blouse, trying to smooth wrinkles from her skirt. She kept repeating affirmations to herself, unsure if they would hold. I'm enough. I'm capable. I deserve this. Lily, seated on the couch with her coloring book, beamed. You look like a superhero, Mommy. Grace kissed her forehead. Then I hope they believe that too. Meanwhile, Victor watched the clock in his office, ignoring texts from investors. He thought about Grace's resolve, her refusal to be pitied. It stirred something in him. He hadn't admired anyone in years. The interview went well, better than Grace expected. She spoke with clarity and passion, her voice steady even as her hands trembled. She didn't hide her past. She owned it. Afterward, she stood outside the building, exhaling for the first time in days. She hadn't gotten the job yet, but she had found something else, a renewed belief in herself, and that was the beginning of a transformation more powerful than any position. To celebrate the courage it took just to try, Victor invited Grace and Lily to the city park that weekend. It wasn't extravagant, just a walk, some warm drinks, and a chance to connect without the pressure of formality. Victor arrived in casual jeans and a wool coat, a far cry from his usual high-end wardrobe. His silver-streaked hair blew gently in the wind as he approached the park bench where Grace waited. She wore her old beige coat again, but somehow carried it with elegance. Lily, bundled in a too-big pink jacket, was already chasing pigeons. They walked beneath bare trees, the sky gray above them, the air crisp. Grace told stories of her childhood. Victor listened intently. She laughed, truly laughed, and it was a sound Victor found himself wanting to hear again and again. At one point, Lily tugged at his sleeve. Do you like us, Mr. Victor? He smiled. Very much. Then you're part of the team now, she announced, hugging his leg. Victor looked down at her, speechless. Grace, watching from a few feet away, caught his eye. Something wordless passed between them. Acceptance, belonging, maybe even the first flickers of something deeper. Victor Halston was no longer the man who stood alone in a penthouse on New Year's Eve. Every meeting he sat in now felt hollow compared to the time he spent with Grace Monroe, soft-spoken yet strong, and her daughter Lily, now the brightest part of his week. Their visits became frequent, walks in the park, lunches in modest cafes, quiet evenings watching cartoons in Grace's tiny living room. Victor never brought gifts or money, only himself, his attention, and slowly his trust. One rainy afternoon, Grace confided in him. I used to think people like you didn't even see people like me. Victor met her eyes. I didn't, but I do now. You made me see. Grace smiled, not out of flattery but because she believed him. Lily, eavesdropping as always, popped up and said, See, I told you Mommy's like magic. Victor laughed, and for the first time Grace didn't stop her daughter from saying such things, because maybe in a way she was. Weeks passed. Then came the phone call Grace had been hoping for. Victor had recommended her, not as a favor but because he believed in her talent and story, to head a new community outreach initiative at Halston Innovations. The project would focus on counseling underserved families. Grace hesitated when she read the offer. She called him that night. Is this your way of saving me? Victor's voice was calm. No, it's my way of giving you space to fly. She was silent for a moment, then said, Then I accept, but only because I'm ready. Not because I owe you. You never owed me anything, Victor replied. And just like that, Grace Monroe, once a forgotten resume on a charity list, became a leader, not just in title, but in purpose. Mornings began differently now. Grace dressed in professional clothes that weren't from a thrift store. Lily went to school with a full lunch and new notebooks. And Victor, once buried in sterile boardrooms, now made time for hot coffee in Grace's kitchen. Their lives, once parallel in opposite worlds, had merged into a quiet, unspoken rhythm. Some nights Victor read to Lily while Grace did paperwork. Other nights Lily fell asleep on Victor's lap, and Grace would watch him as he gently carried her to bed. No one said it aloud, but something was forming between them. Something fragile but real. Victor had stopped running from grief, Grace had stopped hiding from hope, and Lily, she simply basked in the love she had helped create. One rainy evening Victor opened up about the night his wife died. She had cancer. We fought it. But in the end it won. Grace listened, her brown eyes misty but steady. She didn't interrupt. I never got to say goodbye, he whispered. She made me promise not to stop living. But I broke that promise. You were surviving, Grace said gently. That's still living, just not the way you wanted. He looked at her. And you, do you still feel like you're surviving? Grace smiled softly. No, not anymore. That night they didn't touch, but they sat close, and silence for once was no longer empty. Lily was the first to ask, "Are you gonna marry my mommy?" Victor choked on his coffee. Grace burst into laughter. "Lily," she scolded, but her cheeks blushed. Victor, after recovering, looked at Lily. "That's a big question. But you love her, right?" Lily pressed. Victor turned to Grace, his pale skin flushing for once. "I think I'm learning what that means again." Grace didn't run. She didn't hide. She simply said, "Let's take our time. But I'm open to the idea." And with that, even bigger possibilities started to blossom. Victor invited Grace and Lily to see a property he'd been quietly restoring, a charming brownstone with a garden in the back and a sunroom perfect for reading. He didn't call it a gift. He didn't make promises. "I thought maybe we could build something here, together." Grace, tears brimming, stepped through the doorway. Not once in her life had she imagined walking into a home built with love, not money, not desperation, just intention. Lily ran through the hallways. "This is where my dreams live now," she shouted. Victor and Grace stood in the center of the empty living room, the future unfolding around them like sunlight. 3 months later, Grace officially launched the Halston Community Wellness Program. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Victor stood beside her but didn't take the microphone. Grace did. She spoke about second chances, about dignity, about compassion beyond charity. "I stand here not because someone gave me a handout," she said, "but because someone saw me and believed I could rise." The crowd applauded. Victor's eyes shimmered with pride. Later he told her, "You're the voice I never had the courage to use," she replied, "and you gave me the platform I never thought I'd reach." They weren't just partners now. They were something greater. Under a canopy of stars in their garden, Lily already asleep, Victor turned to Grace. "You once said you didn't want fairy tales," he began. "I remember," she said, smiling. "Well, I think we wrote our own," and with that he knelt. From his pocket he pulled a simple gold band. "No diamonds, no drama, just us, and a life I want to spend with you." Grace didn't speak. She leaned down, kissed him, and whispered, "Yes," not because she needed saving, but because they had saved each other. Exactly 1 year after their fateful New Year's Eve, the family of 3 stood on the same park bench where Lily had declared them a team. Victor, now smiling easily, held Lily's hand. Grace, radiant in a deep red coat, stood beside him. "I can't believe how much has changed," she said. Victor looked around. "And it all started with a cup of coffee and a brave little girl," Lily giggled. "Told you mommy's magic." They watched the fireworks bloom overhead, this time not as strangers but as a family. And in that moment, Victor, the man who once had everything but nothing, realized he now had more than he ever dreamed. Love, purpose, belonging. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales of redemption, connection, and second chances. Let love find you in the most unexpected places.